Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Tell me. Hello? Is anybody there? Yeah. Oh, all right. Radio. One way. Okay, right. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Rhetorically, I ask. But you're ignoring me. But that's because you know it's illegal in Florida to tell me how you are. Or it shortly will be. Or something like that. It's very close to that somehow. I don't know how we got to this point. Ron DeSantis, whatever. Okay. Yeah, we're back on Florida. Florida governed by idiots. I don't know. No reason to hold back at this point. I'm not teaching in Florida, so I'm allowed to tell you. It is Tuesday, April 5th. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know whether that reveals anything about my gender or anything. It's difficult to know what's allowed anymore. I'm afraid of being canceled by the people who hate cancel culture. It is Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, according to some. Others disagree, and maybe they won the election. I don't know. Doesn't matter anymore. There's no more facts, and we should all stop. I guess is basically where I am with this. Yeah, I don't know. What has got me this morning, Twitter chatter about, I guess, the latest round of idiocy from Florida. What are they? I don't think I even really read anything yet about what this actually is. But let's see. Their latest legislative endeavor is to bar teachers from discussing anything having to do with sex or gender. As I understand it, this comes out of the Don't Say Gay bill. But are they doing this again? Is this a separate piece of legislation, or is this their original Don't Say Gay bill? But in the last couple of days, there's been a lot of additional attention to one provision of it or whatever else is being legislated, wherein apparently in K through 3 classes is what they claim, although I've seen differing accounts. This is one of those bills that's so dense and stupid that it can be interpreted 10 different ways in the legislative process. But it can't discuss any topic whatsoever, including your own personal life, like I'm married, or I have children, or I am not married, or I'm married but my children have 2 mommies, or whatever, however you choose to put it. Of course, only the last one would ring alarm bells for the conservatives who support such a thing, because, of course, when you say married, they assume you mean heterosexually married. But if you say otherwise, it's a problem. Even though, I don't know how many of you have noticed, but heterosexual married couples have genders, and it means something when that's it, or if they're having children, or if they're adopting children, anything. The point is, of course, that the whole thing was assumed to be written with the assumption of, is there a word? What's the word form for this? Heteronormativity, I suppose. And it never occurred to them that, like, oh yeah, saying that someone is married to someone of the opposite gender that's normal thing. We don't want you talking about the not normal things. But in so doing, of course, privileging all the things that they like. And those are all allowed to be said. Anyway, for whatever reason, the conservatives who are in support of this bill are spending their time lying about how things were back in the days when they were kids. I just happened to notice, reading through my feed, where did this come from exactly? I don't even remember. But one of our good Twitter friends, who I don't think, is with us in the morning listening to the show, but our good friend Ablington, or as we say it out loud, but Allison F., who tweets as Ablington, and I've never bothered to ask why that's the case. At any rate, just, tweeting her usual observations about life, and, finding these prominent conservatives lying their asses off about this stuff, and pretending that back in the day, teachers never, ever, ever would have said anything that would tip people off about what they were up to in private life. In this case, the tweet of one Abigail Schreier, like Crier, but with an SH instead, who, let's say, lists herself on Twitter as a journalist and author. She's written a book. There's a picture of it here. I can't tell what the name of it is because her Twitter photo is over part of it. If you were like totally into her, you know which what she wrote, and if not, then who cares? But her bit today was, in school, we used to try and derail class by asking the teachers questions like, do you have a boyfriend? They never indulged these questions. They said, my private life is none of your business. And that was the correct response. Bring it back. And, well, gee. I mean, I certainly recall that there were probably teachers that if you ask things like, do you have a boyfriend? Sometimes it would elicit that response. But if the question, was, are you married? They were only too happy to answer that question one way or the other, really. And, of course, you knew because there were, salutations that were assigned to them. They would give you Mr., Ms., Mrs., Miss, they tried everything. And, you knew. Or anyway, I don't know, the whole erasure of actual experience, to support this nonsense is it's what bothered Allison and me too, I have to agree. It's nonsense. I mean, to borrow another old Twitter trope, tell me you didn't pay attention in school without telling me you didn't pay attention in school. You didn't have any teachers, none, zero, that got married and changed their name and salutation from Miss to Mrs. In the middle of the year or in between school years. You came back and, your teacher for 7th grade social studies, Miss Smith, is now Mrs. Jones. And you had to get used to that. And it made an impression. And I remember those things. Or a teacher who was pregnant and took a leave of absence in the middle of the year. I had all of that. You had all of that. Don't lie. It's nonsense. And if you didn't notice it, either you were paying zero attention in school, which is how you got to where you are today. That is to say, being ignorant, despite the fact that you've written a book. Congratulations, by the way. It's a big accomplishment. It is. And but you either weren't paying attention, or, by the way, you were taught entirely by people who were not permitted at the time to marry because of their sexual orientation. And, of course, then they would say, hey, that's right, and I had no idea about that, and that's the way it should be. But they didn't indoctrinate you very well, did they? Apparently not. So, one way or another, you lose in this conversation. And good, you should. You're stupid. I don't know. These things are pretty crazy. Anyway, so plenty of other things going on today, including Bill's morning tweet, also on the same subject, I think. We're all talking about this morning. Kagro in the Morning is live at 9 a.m. ET. Today, ET goes home. Today, Kagro X talks about the recent phenomenon of grooming that's in the news, particularly the importance of heel softening cream in your daily hygiene regimen. Yes, it is extraordinarily important. Take care of the feet. They take care of you. So, return the favor. Anyway, yes, grooming behavior. I told you about this last week because we started to spot it, and the smart people started to point out that this was going to become a trend, and I read the words of the smart people who predicted this to you so that you could feel smart too. Yeah, they're all in on this Disney war, and Disney isn't family entertainment anymore. It's depraved sexual grooming and yada yada. Meanwhile, by the way, apparently for whatever reason, Tennessee's legislature is currently considering a bill to repeal the minimum age for marriage, because that's totally in sync with this whole thing, right? I don't know what the minimum age was for marriage in Tennessee, but it doesn't matter because, honestly, I don't understand that either. Like, the Republicans are all about drawing lines. Like, draw a line. I mean, even if you need to draw it, for you guys, probably it's like 14 or 13 or whatever, why have no minimum? Well, I don't know. Libertarianism is, I guess. Why should the state tell you? Well, I don't know. You You just started this whole conversation by saying the state should tell us everything about stuff like that when you don't like the people. But there you go. And, let's see. This morning, I guess. Are we having the... No. This was from yesterday when Senators Murkowski, Collins, and Romney came out to register their approval of Judge Jackson's nomination, which we should be voting on this week at some point. And unless it's today, in which case then we might not hear from Joan. But I think it's not today. I think they were just reporting it out of committee yesterday, which under the usual Senate rules should mean that it will happen sometime Wednesday or afterwards. They usually like to let this thing lie over after having been reported out of committee. And anyway, here's Marjorie Trader Greene tweeting yesterday, last evening, that Murkowski, Collins, and Romney are pro-pedophile because they just voted for #KBJ. And that's where they're going with this one, but everything is now pro-pedophile. Disney, pro-pedophile. They're grooming. Everybody's grooming, but Republicans are the ones trying to repeal the minimum age for marriage. It totally makes sense. It's exactly where we should be as a society. It's very, very weird and very dangerous. All right. That's not likely where I'm going to spend my time today. Let's dive back into Pocket, as well as the old Twitter feed, to try and dig up a few other stories that might be of interest to you. For instance, and on topic here, we'll make the segue this way by reading from Greg Sargent, who has had some ideas and organized them, wrote them down, and now I will use them for content on the show. Thank you, Greg. The other Greg in our lives, Greg Sargent. His piece from yesterday's plumb line in the Washington Post, Ron DeSantis's, and that's what they're going with on the editorial side there. They don't go in for the Ron DeSantis apostrophe and just leave it. Big editorial wars about that, I think, all through my, and throughout my experience, although maybe all the newspapers go with the apostrophe S. Ron DeSantis' repulsive war on Disney will soon face a reckoning. Well, he's an optimist, Greg is. But you'd think one would have to come. I mean, Disney, icon, right? But no, groomer now. The stench of presidential ambition around Ron DeSantis has grown so thick. How thick? Thicker than Ron himself. So thick that it resembles Charlie Brown's pal Pigpen's visible cloud of filth. And it's linked. You can go and see it. And key to the Florida governor's hopes is finding a way to capture the political energies unleashed by Donald Trump. DeSantis must accomplish this while carving out a distinct path from that of the former president, who might run again himself. DeSantis' new war with Disney appears to fit the bill perfectly. As a good report from NBC News chronicles, DeSantis' fellow Republicans see this battle as key to burnishing his national anti-woke brand. DeSantis escalated his attacks on Disney amid its criticism of the law he signed, limiting classroom discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity. Yes, okay, that's the one we were talking about earlier. But DeSantis' war on Disney will soon face a reckoning. A big question is whether DeSantis will seek to revoke Disney's state tax incentives as a weapon in the war over that measure, which opponents call the Don't Say Gay law. Yes, that's the new level of escalation in the war on Disney. He and I saw Laura Ingraham doing the same thing, I think, over the weekend. Their new tool here is to threaten all of the special treatment that Disney gets from the state legislature, and presumably if there's any legislation on the federal level that protects them, and there are some, more distantly related to Disney and profiting them. But he wants to see all these things repealed because they have petitioned the government for redress of grievances. And as you know, everyone who loves the Constitution knows that you're not allowed to petition the government for redress of grievances. That will trigger targeted response against you using the power of the government to silence you. And I think that's okay under the Constitution now. I think if you're a Republican, I'm just checking, there's no sort of amendment that would be offended by that one. I haven't had a chance to look. I started by I thought I would read them in order. And I read Amendment the First in the old language there. And then I was like, oh, the phone might ring. I better listen for it. And then I got lost and I don't know what happened. So I didn't get very far in the constitutional amendments, but there's probably nothing about that. But so here comes the reckoning. What will happen? Let's see. If so, or if it happens, that could alienate Republicans who are fine with a bit of performative culture warring, but want to keep corporations happy where it really counts, i.e. on their bottom line. If not, that could disappoint right-wingers who actively want Republicans to wield state power whenever possible to bring woke corporations to their knees. I think what they're talking about, the sorts of measures, in addition to all sorts of state tax incentives that they have, since they're, I think, the largest employer in Florida. But they also have all sorts of special dispensations to like operate the town in which the Disney plant is located as an independent municipality, and they get to run it and have all like laws and police and everything. I don't know, company town sort of thing happening there. But it's Disney, so it's all great. And they also keep threatening to revoke their extensions for copyright, which of course keep them rolling in money because no one can use Disney characters and they can sue anybody who does. So there's all sorts of bottom line benefits to them. By the way, as others have pointed out, they are benefits which they probably could get support on both sides of the proverbial aisle if they removed all the rest of the vitriol from it and actually had real reasons. Like if they wanted to limit Disney's ability to renew copyright and extend that out infinitely so they can continue to make money off of things that weren't even originally their stories, for instance, or I don't know, if they didn't want to protect them with huge tax advantages, I don't think that everybody would oppose that across the board. I mean, we all kind of like Disney, but I think they're doing okay, even without the special protections. They'd probably survive. They could get support for that, but of course they've tied it to this stupid agenda, and now no normal people want to help them with that because it's mean and vicious and stupid and backwards and upside down from the way lives really work. And people who recognize that, they're the normal ones, and they say no to this. But they insist. They really do want to leverage the power of government to force the biggest employer in the state to, leave the state, pay fewer people. Not sure what the goal really is. Disney came out against the Don't Say Gay bill. We should point out that they came out after facing intense internal pressure from employees. Disney argued that it could be used to unfairly target LGBT kids and families, which is, kind of the point. That's a perfectly reasonable fear. The law outlaws instruction, whatever that is, in sexual orientation or gender identity that is not age appropriate. Legal experts note that such vague wording could allow conservative parents to claim violations in many typical situations, such as a teacher mentioning gay families. I am one, I have one, I know one. There are some. No, can't be done. Or a kid discussing her gay parents. Or a teacher helping a transgender student seek counseling. Which, by the way, should work both ways, but naturally won't. Like if you find out that a student is transgender or is thinking about transitioning, and you try to get them counseling so that they don't transition. That should land you in trouble, but I have a feeling it won't. Regardless, DeSantis has gone on the attack. He's raising money off Disney's opposition, labeling it radical. And he recently suggested that he might target Disney's special privileges in his state. That's repulsive stuff. Even some Republicans have noted that Disney is simply exercising its right to weigh in on a public issue. It's sort of guaranteed by the Constitution. One that matters deeply to many customers and employees and shouldn't face the threat of state retaliation for doing so. Regardless, under questioning from reporters, DeSantis then clarified he is not targeting Disney's enormously lucrative tax breaks. one of which totals in the hundreds of millions of dollars to encourage Disney to move more than 2,000 employees from Florida to California. DeSantis justified this by claiming all companies are treated equally by such tax incentives. Did I read that right? That didn't sound so good. Targeting Disney's... Oh, I'm sorry. He's not targeting... did I not read that correctly? I didn't understand it correctly, that's for sure. Under questioning from reporters, DeSantis has clarified he's not targeting Disney's enormously lucrative tax breaks, one of which totals in hundreds of millions of dollars to encourage Disney to move more than 2,000 employees to Florida from California. Okay. I don't know. For some reason, I was thinking backwards. Maybe I read it right the first time. DeSantis justified this by claiming all companies are treated equally by such tax incentives, but he's not going to take that one away. Okay. But as Florida State Representative Anna Eskamani, a Democrat, points out, Disney benefits from a tax incentive program only available to very large corporations. Eskamani says DeSantis should repeal Disney's tax breaks in order to actually treat businesses equally as a matter of good policy, rather than allowing the status quo to remain while going after Disney in a merely performative way. Nothing about Disney's business model has changed whatsoever, Eskamani told me. James Clark, a history professor at the University of Central Florida, points to a subtle game at work here. Disney has poured enormous sums into the campaign coffers of DeSantis and GOP state legislatures, according to the Orlando Sentinel. It says legislatures, but they might mean legislators, although I'm sure that they've poured money into many states. Though some Democrats have benefited as well. DeSantis' rhetorical attacks on Disney might not be enough to imperil future Disney donations to Republicans. Should be. But, you know how these corporations are. They reversed themselves on January 6th. Meanwhile, if Republicans keep its corporate interests largely protected, it could help sustain that arrangement. Disney has been very helpful to the Republican Party, Clark told me. I don't think Republicans want to do anything to jeopardize that flow of money. Disney has said it's reassessing its political donations in response to the new law, but that will likely blow over. He's right about that. Yet there's one thing, and here it is. It says, here's the thing. Some on the right, particularly the new nationalists seeking to build a post-Trump Trumpism, actually do believe the state should be weaponized to fight the culture wars as aggressively as possible. Fox News' Laura Ingraham is urging Republicans to use every tool of government possible to break corporations economically as a weapon of retaliation against excessive wokeness. It's sometimes said that Republicans are turning against large corporations in a fundamental shift of economic ideology, but that's mostly nonsense. Republicans have mainly threatened retaliation for corporate transgressions such as standing up for African Americans' voting rights, trying to protect customers and workers with vaccine mandates, cooperating with a congressional investigation into Trump's insurrection, and now speaking up for LGBT people. Indeed, one prominent right-wing activist explicitly told Michelle Goldberg that attacks on Disney are all about teaching it, quote, the lesson that, quote, they should stay out of politics. Unless they're giving me money. The goal is to wield state power to dissuade corporations from empowering the enemy known as social liberalism. Ooh, and that probably deserves some dramatic music. Maybe I'll open up Michelle Goldberg's piece, too, and take a look at what that has to say. Yet, at some point, you'd think some on the right will want to see actual corporate blood on the floor. As a Know Your Enemy podcast powerfully details, the use of state government to punish, or to government power to punish or stigmatize trans kids and their families is multiplying ferociously across the country. How long until the right wants real results in the war against corporate wokeness? If so, keeping the old cozy relationship between Disney and Florida Republicans, such as DeSantis, largely intact, just won't cut it anymore. Anyway, I think it's a wished-for reckoning, more so than an actual reckoning that we can see on the horizon. Michelle Goldberg, usually good on such things, well, all things. The right's Disney freakout. I would like to read a little bit more about this, and why not, just before our break. This came out last Friday, April Fool's Day, but I guess she's being serious. I don't know LaToya Raveneau. Me neither. But I feel terrible for her. An executive producer at Disney. She was a speaker at a recent virtual all-hands company meeting about Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. Inside Disney, there had been considerable anger that the company, one of the state's largest employers, had donated to politicians behind the bill and hadn't done more to fight it. Raveneau stepped up to defend the company's queer friendliness, only to become a national object of right-wing fury and disgust. Tough spot. On a video call, Raveneau spoke about her initial apprehension about taking a job at Disney, fearing she wouldn't be allowed to include gay characters in the projects she worked on. Instead, she said everyone she worked with has welcomed her not at all secret gay agenda, letting her add queerness to the animated show she directs, a revival of an early aughts series called The Proud Family. I think I remember hearing about that. That was like back in the days when my kids were young and watching the Disney Channel. The results of Raveneau's agenda... Whoa, a little overdone on the alarm today. Okay, I got to make sure that that's turned down. And that interrupts things a little bit. That's a little unusual. I don't usually hear it that loud. The results of Raveneau's agenda seem sweetly anodyne. The show's main character, Penny Proud, has a flamboyant gay friend who has to deal with bullying. And another character has gay dads. So, like normal life. And Disney's trying to reflect that. It's worth money, right? Anyway, there's been some reporting about the groundbreaking nature of the show in the entertainment press, but as far as I can see, it hasn't caused much, if any, controversy. Then the conservative activist Christopher Rufo stepped in. And everybody thinks everything he does, well, all the Republicans think everything he touches is magic. And I guess it's something to think about. All we need is for one of his stupid ideas, like say this one, to turn into poison and ruin things for Republicans before his day in the sun is over with. I'd like to see that. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Let's continue where we left off on Michelle Goldberg's piece here, talking about Chris Rufo having stepped into this controversy. Rufo obtained video of that all-hands meeting from Disney, and he presented clips of Raveneau's remarks, along with those of several other Disney executives, as evidence that Disney is, as he's pushing them, he seems to be behind the strategy here, which is really amazing. The evidence that Disney is sexualizing children. And I think Media Matters put together a great compilation of clips of Fox News hosts and others saying the phrase sexualizing children over and over and over again. And by the way, of course they had a clip of Tucker Carlson doing it like 10 times. And Tucker Carlson, I think, was sexualizing M&Ms not long ago. So I find that kind of strange. But, gimme-tarianism, whatever it takes to get through the day. The story has blown up on the right, where Raveneau's arch reference to a gay agenda is being treated as an admission that she has a plan to corrupt kids, because, of course, Republicans still believe that that's what being gay means, that it's about preying on children, though it has nothing whatsoever to do with it. And most of the people preying on children are, well, to be honest, most of them turn out to be Republicans on top of everything else. The Republican Squad thread that I have going on Twitter should more than dissuade you of it if you believe otherwise. Anyway, yes, so I think what has made it hot was not so much how much it resonates with Republicans as that Chris Rufo is behind it, and they're like, that's the guy. Who's that? That's the guy who was behind the whole thing about CRT, about who sold the whole, ball of wax to parents. Oh, parents need to be able, you just need to listen to parents because they're against having CRT taught in the classroom, but also maybe masks and possibly also vaccination, something, and maybe transgender bathroom thing. I don't know. Anyway, the point is he's the one who put that whole thing together where we should all go to our school boards and scream at people and take video of ourselves being arrested and turn it into a national movement. And why do we think that's a good thing? Oh, remember that guy Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia and it was all about the schools? Oh, yeah. But didn't it turn out to be that it was really mostly about some odd phenomenon, like the number of voters over the age of 75 turning out and, the turnout in the reddest counties of Virginia. And then he barely eked out a win, right? I mean, it's pretty slim, wasn't it? Yeah, but I mean, whatever, something. The point is there was a win, and going back and examining how that win happened to see whether it meant that his strategy worked or it was something else is besides the point. I'm Christopher Rufo, and I need to cash in. Shut up. Stop asking questions. I'm a genius. Follow my next battle plan, which is pick a fight with Disney. And instead of them being the all-American, wholesome family entertainment behemoth, they're in fact a bunch of child sex predators. Because no one's tired of us saying that everyone we hate are child sex predators. Let's do it again. But what if he's right? Well, anyway, here's what Rufo is passing on to them and what people like Laura Ingraham are repeating. This isn't programming. This is propaganda for grooming, hissed Fox's Laura Ingraham on Wednesday. Disney isn't just grooming children with radical sexual propaganda. Now they're bragging about it, said a writer for The Federalist. Raveneau has landed in the middle of a renascent moral panic, one that combines elements of QAnon with old tropes about gay predators. When I spoke to Rufo on Thursday, I put polonium in his sandwich and he died. No, that's not what she said. I'm sorry. When I spoke to Rufo on Thursday, he was frank about wanting to punish Disney for giving in to employee pressure to oppose the Florida law. Perhaps the lesson that they're learning, and certainly the lesson that they should be learning, is that they should stay out of politics, he said. Yeah, well, all right, let's let you drive the Republicans say corporations should stay out of politics thing. I mean, we shouldn't sit back and think that's going to backfire because the truth is gimmitarianism works very well. They should stay out of politics. Then you should give me money. But that's not staying out of politics. I know, but now I'm, wealthy and I have money and I can run for office and I can win and I can do these things. But then they won't give to you. They actually kind of will because I'll do something about their taxes and they'll say, fine. Okay, but keep an eye on it. Until recently, Rufo was best known for his work mobilizing the right against critical race theory, but in recent months, both he and the movement he helped catalyze have turned their attention to gender and sexual identity, probably because he has a sexual identity to hide from you. He believes there's a lot of latent alarm among parents over changing ideas about gender, and he intends to tap into it. Wink, wink. I think there's an opportunity to do the reporting, to build the narrative, much in the same way as critical race theory, he said, which is to say, lie about it over and over again until everybody gets crazy panicked. And that does work, and it will work again, but, he also might fall off a cliff. Rufo's work helped inspire a wave of state legislation limiting the way teachers can talk about race, history, and current events under the guise of banning critical race theory. Now, a new wave of legislation is targeting what teachers can say about LGBTQ issues. As PEN America, P-E-N, I don't know what P-E, it's an acronym, but as PEN America reported, and I could click over and find out, but why don't you do that? As PEN America reported, the fight against critical race theory, quote, has primed the public to support sweeping censorship of classroom speech. For anti-LGBTQ plus activists, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a chance to ram through bills that are far more restrictive than anything the public would normally accept. The most notorious of these new laws is, of course, Florida's HB 1557, the Don't Say Gay law, which prohibits classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity for kids below 4th grade, and any such instruction that is not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate for older students. It has an enforcement mechanism similar to Texas's recent abortion bounty law, everyone's using that now, allowing individual parents to sue for damages and recoup attorneys' fees if they win. What constitutes classroom instruction is unclear, but many fear it could include any mention of gay or transgender people, including students' families. Governor Ron DeSantis signed it on Monday. To justify the law, that would have been last Monday, the right has taken to accusing anyone who opposes it of wanting to expose young kids to explicit material in order to prime them for abuse. On Twitter, DeSantis' press secretary, another horrible person, wrote, "If you're against the anti-grooming bill, you are probably a groomer, or at least you don't denounce the grooming of 4 to 8-year-old children." The QAnon idea that the right's political opposition is a cabal of pedophiles has gone mainstream. And of course, everything being projection with them. I mean, we all think it's funny to say, but we keep having to arrest them and find out that they are the pedophiles that they're so afraid of. And I don't know. It doesn't sink in. So, yeah, 1, I guess, don't count on any reckoning. And 2, don't count on defeating gaymitarianism by pointing out the illogic of it. It won't work. This is, of course, not the first time that gay and gender nonconforming people have been framed as a moral threat to children. In 1977, Anita Bryant, a former beauty queen, who would have been, of course, groomed, a former beauty queen and spokeswoman for the Florida Citrus Commission, I remember that, started the anti-gay Save Our Children campaign. Homosexuals cannot reproduce, so they must recruit, she said. And to freshen their ranks, they must recruit the youth of America, which was always, insane nonsense to begin with. But they cannot reproduce. As though, are heterosexual couples breeding children for the purpose of having sex with them? That doesn't make any sense. But, what am I looking for sense for? It doesn't make any sense. Shut up. Yeah. In recent years, the Republican Party has largely eschewed such language, appearing to make their peace with the presence of gays, lesbians, and transgender people in public life. Now such rhetoric is back, and it's potentially explosive. Companies' most valuable asset is their brand, said Rufo, and we're going to start to erode that. In the video of the Disney meeting that Rufo released, Ravno enthused about how much freedom she's been given to depict queer characters, but the price of that freedom just went up, and it remains to be seen if Disney will be willing to pay it. That's true, and of course, eventually, he won't care about this, because this is about Chris Rufo's rise to fame more than anything else. Even if it ends up damaging the Republican Party at large, what does he care? That's the Trump model, right? So he's being as Trumpy as possible. This is getting me famous. It's getting me dollars. We will do this. He might actually believe this is bringing political power to him and his allies. It may or may not be, but, chiefly it's about the dollars and becoming the guy, the strategist for the Republican Party. It is, nerds on both sides of the aisle dream about that day arriving for them. For most, it never comes. So, when somebody hits a home run for their team politically, or convinces their team that they've hit a home run anyway, they ride the gravy train for as long as they can. And this is how he's going to be doing it. But as he says, companies' most valuable asset is their brand, and we're going to start to erode that. What he means is we will erode the brands of individual corporations with which we disagree if they continue to disagree with us. But what it really means is they will be eroding the ability of a corporation to develop and exploit their most valuable assets, which will just make, the corporate organization and the corporate form less effective at generating profits for the owners, less effective at expanding their reach in the market, less effective at channeling dollars upward towards the upper management. So, maybe it's not all bad, but we're going to have to jump on and use the tool to our own purposes later on, unless we're just going to get railroaded by the whole thing and just get run over in every single direction. But that's the new Republican agenda: undermine the ability of corporations to fulfill their earning potential and to maximize profits, which we were always taught. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. And I don't know. And another lesson, by the way, in politics in general for Democrats who are too timid, right? We were always told by the right that the whole purpose of the corporation was to maximize profits. And we've had this discussion on the show. Maximize profits, right? Yes, but so for who? Right? And that they very neatly, I think, used the 1980s and Wall Street movie and Greed is Good and the whole culture to subtly shift from it's the aim of corporations to maximize profits for stakeholders into maximize profits for shareholders, a very particular type of stake that was held. And that became the mantra, and it was enormously successful and popular, or so we were told. And so Democrats said, well, we got to get a piece of that. And they sort of adopted the same stance, and the corporations are the ones who create jobs. And if we put money in the hands of either wealthy people who start lots of companies or companies themselves, that they will trickle down that money. They will create jobs for people. But then we noticed along the way that the same instruction program that tells business students in general that the aim of a corporation is to maximize profits for the shareholders also tells them that payroll is a cost center. It's actually, I don't know, for some reason hidden from view, but they tell people for outward consumption or outside consumption, they say cutting taxes, putting more capital in the hands of capitalists creates jobs, even though they're teaching those same capitalists, if you want to hold on to the most of your capital, don't forget that employees, payroll is a cost center. Never, never, never create jobs or hire people unless there's a way to get more out of it than they get. And there's more, certainly you have to make more than you spend, of course, but you want to be sure that you're getting more of what gets created than they are. Otherwise, it's not interesting to us. Let them create their own damn companies if they want to do things equally. So, no, they will seek to avoid creating as many jobs as possible, because every job not created while still fulfilling the core function of the company and generating revenue is an extra dollar in their pockets. I don't know why we fail to notice this. They teach it out in the open. Anyway, okay, moving on from there. Plenty of other things on the list in Pocket. Some of them are old tweets, so I have to go and check in on them and open them up and see what they are. Oh, yes, I put this one away yesterday. Right after the show, I saw this tweet from Jesse Balmert, who is a reporter. I'm going to read her Twitter bio here. Reporter covering Ohio government and redistricting, which we told you was in constitutional crisis yesterday, as the Republican state legislature considering impeaching the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, who keeps telling them, you can't cheat on redistricting. The Constitution, the Ohio State Constitution, demands a certain pattern be followed, that the statewide mix of elections or of political preference, party preference, has to be reflected in the redistricting plans, and Republicans keep saying, nuh-uh, it doesn't. She keeps ruling against them, so they're going to impeach her, or at least they're discussing impeaching her. That's the crisis. But Jesse Balmert tweeting yesterday that today, which was yesterday, is the deadline for members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission to explain why they should not be held in contempt for failing repeatedly to follow the orders of the court, right? Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State, argues he's simply casting a vote for a finished plan. It's not my fault that the plan doesn't comply with the Constitution. A finished plan was put in front of me, and I voted for it. Well, okay, I don't know how well that's going to fly in court, but that's interesting. Let's see, are there any comments about it? Or maybe I should check in to see what happened, since yesterday was the deadline. What is on Jesse Ballmert's timeline today? Let's see. Oh, well, actually, first up, about an hour ago, she happens to have tweeted new news. Ohio Republicans introduced their version of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, along with a picture of the sponsor, and goodness, but she looks just like what you might have thought she would look like. Well, you know, books, covers. I judge them. You should too. Why not? It was always a dumb saying. If you can't judge a book by its cover, why are publishing companies spending so much money designing those covers? The whole purpose is to be judged by its cover, and, well, okay. I don't know. I guess that was a saying that came from back in the day when there wasn't such aggressive marketing of books. I don't know. Also, though, I mean, it's old enough to be from the days when all books more or less had the same cover. So maybe they meant that. Don't judge a book by its cover, because the cover is just like leather with gold embossed lettering on it. And what does that mean? Nothing. So it would be dumb to judge a book by its cover. And then later, it became smart to do so. But we never got rid of the saying. Very, very typical of us. What else do we have? No, Jesse's, let's see, talking about some gun bills. Looks like there was an open carry discussion of some kind. Culture wars rage in Ohio as lawmakers debate guns, abortion, LGBTQ rights, and more. So there's a lot going on. Anything about the... yeah, all right. Well, here's reporting on it. We'll see whether it's Jesse's own reporting or not, from Cincinnati.com. It is Jesse's reporting, so it makes good sense. Let's jump over to that. Just as a follow-up from yesterday, Republicans argue they approved only completed maps and shouldn't face contempt of court. Republicans who approved Ohio's latest House and Senate maps, that is to say the state Senate, which has districts, not the U.S. Senate, which doesn't. They argued that they ditched hired map makers' plans because they weren't finished and likely violated the Ohio Constitution. Now they're concerned about that. Okay. Those suing over Ohio's legislative maps want members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission, or at least the 4 Republicans who voted for maps last week, held in contempt of court for ignoring the Ohio Supreme Court's order to complete constitutional maps. Maps approved late last week were nearly identical to House and Senate districts rejected by the Ohio Supreme Court's 4-3 majority. The maps would give the GOP... Oh, at least they're closer to the right numbers. The maps would give the GOP 54-45 advantage in the House and an 18-15 advantage in the Senate, in line with the Ohioans' voting preferences. The adjustments also reduced the number of highly competitive Democratic districts to 17 in the House and 6 in the Senate. On the final day of map making, Senate President Matt Huffman pitched this solution as a, quote, fail-safe if 2 map makers hired by the commission didn't complete their work. In the end, those maps were the ones approved by 4 GOP members in the Ohio Redistricting Commission. Republican Auditor Keith Faber opposed the plans because they contained too many splits and districts that were not compact. The Democrats on the commission, House Minority Leader Allison Russo and Senator Vernon Sykes, asked the group to approve the hired mapmakers plan instead, saying it was finished, but that failed along party lines. Republicans in court filings vehemently disagreed that the hired mapmakers plan was done. Is it or isn't it? They also took issue with the independent maps, and that's in scare quotes, including districts drawn by Democratic redistricting consultant Chris Glassburn without GOP members' approval. It is undisputed that the independent map drawers ran out of time to draw a map from scratch that met with requirements of this court's order and the Ohio Constitution, wrote attorneys for Huffman and Speaker Bob Cupp. Only after that became clear did the commission adopt the fail-safe plan that complies with the Constitution. There is no contempt, only a good faith effort to comply with this court's orders. In an affidavit, one of the hired map makers, National Demographics Corporation's Douglas Johnson, said he didn't have time to check that his work complied with the Ohio Constitution. Well, Dr. Michael McDonald and I made every effort as we were drawing the maps to follow those requirements, but I didn't have time to conduct the detailed review to confirm whether that is the case, Johnson wrote. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, in a filing, argued he shouldn't be held in contempt of court because he did his duty as a commission member. He cast a vote for maps based on the options he had at the time. LaRose was recently recorded telling Republicans that he certainly wouldn't oppose the impeachment of Ohio Supreme Court Justice Maureen O'Connor over her redistricting decisions. LaRose said she violated her oath of office by making up what she wants the law to say instead of interpreting what it actually says. Attorneys for Governor Mike DeWine argued he couldn't be held responsible for failing to achieve an impossible task. Impossibility is a total defense here, not only because the governor cannot unilaterally issue new redistricting maps or dictate the commission's decisions, but also because the expert-drawn maps were never completed with the required time frame, despite their best efforts. According to DeWine's court filing, Faber, who voted against the maps, said that trying to hold members in contempt of court was a frivolous action. They were filed not based upon merit, but to obviously harass the commission and its individual members. Attorneys for several Republicans also argued that holding members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission in contempt would violate the separation of powers between judicial and executive or legislative branches. Now, it's a check and balance against the branch. It's not a violation of the separation of powers, but I see where they're going with it. But then there would be no laws for the executive branch. You can't say, well, by law, you have to have your budget ready on time. No, you don't, because you can't be sentenced to anything. All right. Anyway, so that's nonsense. Meanwhile, the commission's Democrats, Russo and Sykes, asked the Ohio Supreme Court to strike down the fourth map and have the commission approve ones crafted by the hired map makers instead. Without the Ohio Supreme Court's swift intervention, it's likely that a panel of federal judges will pick maps on April 20th. The last possible date to hit an August 2nd primary. Okay. So that didn't really clear much up, but that's the news from inside the courtroom. We'll have to kind of see how that shakes out. The way it's reported, it sounds like the Redistricting Commission may have a pretty reasonable defense to the idea of holding them in contempt. I wonder who it was that made the move to try to hold them in contempt. Anyway, that's the news on that front. We'll have to keep an eye on that on an ongoing basis. Let's see, other things. Oh, let's head back to... No, you know what? We'll save this one for after the top of the hour break and do this subject instead. I have a CNN piece here that harkens back to something that happened last week. And then over the weekend, I saw some real confusion about this, and I thought I might be able to clear something up. The CNN piece, Trump's presidential diarist tells the January 6th committee that White House officials provided less detail about his activities, Trump's activities, the days before the riot. This goes back to the phone logs and the 7.5-hour gap in the White House phone logs on January 6th. Big explosive story, and we talked about it, and we talked about it properly, and everybody, started to get excited about the idea of, oh, gee whiz, an 18.5-minute gap in the Nixon tapes was a big deal. What about this 7.5-hour gap? Of course, it's not erased phone conversations, but the idea that he wasn't making any phone calls, and the phone calls weren't recorded as they were required to be under the Presidential Records Act. But, that doesn't matter anymore either, because judges can't sentence anybody to anything in the executive branch. So, violation of separation of powers. Anyway, that's not really true. But the idea was, well, in addition to the ridiculousness of trying to convince me that Donald Trump stayed off the phone for 7.5 hours, the idea was to cover up what he was doing and provide no record of it, even though we have already got the record of some of the phone calls he made from the other side. So it was an obvious lie, or at least an obvious omission from required reporting. Anyway, the next day or so, there was they begin to question the people who keep these records. How did this happen? Why did this happen? We know that there were phone calls. How is it that they're not on his phone log? And, well, the answer that was returned to them, and then upon examination by the news organizations who were reporting this stuff, was they went back and they looked at the logs and said, maybe there's some pages missing or something like that, or some reporting missing from this. No. Every page is accounted for here. and they asked about it at among the former White House employees, and they said, no, these logs are complete. And that was taken by Trump's defenders, oddly enough, including, I think, Glenn Greenwald for some reason, as, well, look, these reporters once again running with the story that just doesn't pan out, excitedly coming out with something anti-Trump and hitting them with it, and then it turns out not to be true. The phone logs are complete. You're saying that they're incomplete, and that's a big scandal, but they're not incomplete. They're complete. Well, they're not. Not that way. For anybody that's still confused about this, I tweeted about it over the weekend, so I cleared it all up. Everybody read it on Twitter. But anybody that's still confused about this thing, well, these guys say it's complete. There's nothing missing. And yet, those phone logs are missing. And so the reporters tried to say, well, maybe he was making those calls on private cell phones, and they don't log those. But of course, the calls in many cases that we know about were coming from White House switchboard numbers. So that's not really the case. That doesn't really explain it. It wasn't what was happening. He was making phone calls from the White House switchboard that still aren't logged. What they mean, though, by complete, that's the confusing part. They say it's complete, right? So what can I do? We must just be misunderstanding what's going on here. Well, no, you're not. They are. When they say that the phone logs are complete, when the White House employees who were questioned about it say that these logs are complete, what they mean is we have completed all the work that we can or are willing to do on them. That's what that means. It represents the totality of our work on the logs. It does not necessarily represent the totality of the calls that were made or the calls that should have been logged under federal law. It just represents a complete record of the logs that I made. I only logged certain calls, probably at the request or the instruction of the president and his closest advisors, but this is the whole thing that I made. The log is complete. As far as I'm concerned, it's like turning in your homework incomplete and saying, did you do it? Yeah, I completed it. Well, you didn't answer 10 questions. Yeah, but I completed working. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I finally got the sound turned down. The iPhone has always driven me crazy. You can. There's two separate volume settings. I guess one for the phone ringer. So if someone calls you on the phone, and they're using the phone function, the ringer can be turned all the way down. But at the same time, the volume for anything else that you might do on the phone, alarms, playing videos, whatever, can still be turned all the way up. And if you grab the phone after the alarm goes off, and I hit shut the hell up button, right? And as soon as I do that, it stops, and now it puts it back out of that mode, the alarm mode, and I lower the volume, and it's like, oh, lowering the volume. Okay, showed me the indicator all the way down. Now the volume is all the way off, right? But that's for if the phone rings later. If you keep letting the alarm ring and turn down press the sound down button, then it will lower the alarm noise, the alarm level. And then after you leave the alarm function, all bets are off. But I don't know. Somehow they make it really annoying. Or maybe I just don't understand it. And I would just rather smash my phone than not really do anything to keep from smashing my phone. Anyway, so yes, I hope I cleared things up for you by discussing the idea of the complete logs. It's not that the logs are complete, it's that their work on compiling them is complete. I didn't answer questions 1 through 10, but my homework is complete in the sense that I'm not doing any more of it, and I have handed it to you. Complete. No, incomplete. No, not from my perspective. Complete. That's all that's happening here, and I don't know why people have partisan reasons for falling for it, I guess. But even so, the explanations that were given in the reporting on the incompleteness of it don't hold water anyway. So I don't even know why they bothered to bring those things forward. They just reported the other day that those calls were being made from White House switchboard numbers. There's no case in which it's okay to not log them. And unfortunately, there's also just nobody interested in enforcing the Presidential Records Act because they never put any teeth in it anyway. They should do, you know what, we should federalize the bounties. There should be a $10,000 bounty for me for pointing out that the Presidential Records Act was violated. And even if the Trump administration people don't go to jail, I should get the $10,000. That's just the way I think it should work. All right. Well, actually, I think that brings us up to date on that strange story. But I wanted to point that out because it is a really weird semantic game, and I can't believe anybody fell for it. I mean, you know that there were calls that were definitely made that aren't on the log. And then they tell you they're complete. Like, there's only two ways there's three ways you can work this out in your head. And I guess you dismissed two of them. One is, well, I don't know. I know about calls that were made, and they were made from White House numbers, and they're definitely confirmed, but they're not on the log. So that could mean one of three things. Either they didn't log the calls for some reason, and when they say they're complete, like reconciling the completeness thing, is either they are hiding the calls and they're just saying, I've completed work on these things, which is what I'm saying. I should have saved this one for last because that's the one that makes the most sense, really. The one that they came up with was, well, maybe they were made on other phones that really weren't White House phones. But no, you already know that they were made on White House phones because those are the numbers that came through on the calls to Mike Lee and Kevin McCarthy, etc., and Jim Jordan. So why are you even entertaining this? I don't know, because it's one of three possibilities. But this one's been eliminated logically. I know, but it is a possibility. I mean, it was before it was eliminated logically. No, it's just a bad one. But I'm going to go with it. That's the one I'm going to report. So either that, or it could be that they're lying about it, like, no, there weren't such calls. Okay, but you know that they were. So you were willing to eliminate that one, too. It doesn't make any sense. The only serious explanation is the one that's semantic and that doesn't occur to them. It made zero sense, the CNN reporting on it. And you know what? How long is that piece? Not that long. Let me run through it just to see how they're constructing their argument here. Zachary Cohen, Jamie Gangel, Ryan Nobles, Annie Grayer, and Paula Reed. That's a lot of names on this CNN piece. Again, Trump's presidential diarist tells January 6th committee White House officials provided less detail about his activities days before the riot. And that, I don't know if that's a new headline, but that tends to clear things up. I mean, what they're saying is the people who kept the logs and the diaries were told less information about what the president was doing. They put everything they got, I guess is their testimony, down on paper. But we now know, and likely they knew then, that there was more going on than what they were being told. But what could they do? They can't just make stuff up and say, I think he's on the phone. Let's just make up who he's on the phone with and how long. There's only so much they can do. Just days before the U.S. Capitol riot, White House officials started providing fewer details about then-President Donald Trump's calls and visits. The person in charge of compiling those activities for the official record told the House Select Committee investigating January 6th, according to two sources with knowledge of the probe. The committee interviewed Trump's presidential diarist roughly 2 weeks ago. That interview has not been previously reported, nor is the testimony describing a noticeable drop-off in information provided by the Oval Office staff leading up to January 6th. Other witnesses have also told the panel there was significantly less information being shared with those involved in White House record-keeping during the same time period. One source described how White House record keepers appeared to be iced out, in quotes, iced out in the days leading up to January 6th. The last day that normal information was sent was the 4th, said another source familiar with the investigation. So, starting the 5th, the diarist didn't receive the annotated calls and notes. That was a dramatic departure. That's all out of the ordinary. The White House diarist normally receives many streams of information, including the phone logs from the switchboard, the president's movements from the U.S. Secret Service, and, critically, the notes from Oval Office operations, which detail calls, guests, and activities. But sources close to the panel's investigation do not seem to know Yet, who, if anyone, directed a change in record keeping, or what the motivation behind that change was, raising questions about whether the lack of information was intentional or for staffing issues. It's tough to know what the change was. Was it intentional? One source said. You can only keep track of something when you know what's going on. When people don't share things with you, whether that was intentional and who decided that, I think it's a little murky at this point. The House committee declined to comment. CNN reached out to a spokesman for Trump. They didn't hear back. They didn't hear back from the National Archives either. These revelations come as the House Select Committee is trying to understand what Trump was doing and not doing, like calling for help or trying to get people to stop, during a 7-hour gap that exists in the White House call log and the presidential diary from January 6th. Recently revealed switchboard call logs and the presidential diary for the day contain no information about the then president's actions during the riot, including phone calls that are known to have occurred and should have been documented in the diary. CNN previously reported that a likely explanation for the gap in the phone log is that Trump used cell phones, direct landlines, or aides phones that bypassed the White House switchboard. An official review of the call logs found no missing pages. And I guess, I don't know whether they updated this story or they linked to an earlier, there it is, an earlier story. Official review of Trump phone logs from January 6th finds record is complete. That was the bad headline that led people, whatever. That was the headline that led people to conclude that, the media's been chasing rabbits again, and this is nonsense, and they lied, and they have such an agenda. Now, they were right, but they made them doubt themselves, and that's annoying. While the Select Committee does not have detailed notes about the comings and goings into the Oval Office on January 6th, they received testimony that has helped fill in some of the gaps, according to a source familiar with the investigation. That includes calls Trump made and received, as well as who was with him in the private dining room off the Oval Office as he reportedly watched the riot unfold on television. Maybe repeatedly, too. He watched it on instant replay. Ooh, look at the way he hits that cop with the fire extinguisher. The presidential diary that was generated for January 6th contains scant details. It lists information from the switchboard call logs, Trump's public schedule, but little else besides a phone call the former president had with an unidentified individual at 11:17 a.m. No other entries from the diary for roughly 3 hours from 1:21 p.m. to 4:03 p.m. Critical time. The Presidential Records Act outlines that the Office of the Presidency has an obligation to adequately document activities of the president, but there's little to no enforcement mechanism to ensure the law is followed. While there are criminal consequences for the destruction of government records, there are none that penalize the failure to create them in the first place. No explanation has been given so far as to why calls known to have been made in the hours Trump was in the Oval Office are not documented on the presidential diary. But around that time, a number of factors could have reduced the flow of information into the official record. For one, sources told CNN that early January was a chaotic time inside the White House and that Trump was spending more time in the residence, conducting less official business because he was saving the nation, of course. According to, that's an odd way to save the country, don't you think? More time in the residence, less time conducting official business. But it was all official business. That's why you can't have my records. Yeah, sure. According to one former Trump official, all sense of normal order started to break down, and around early January, the cracks were showing. While some people had been looking to find other jobs, others had been confused, and it became every man for himself, the former official added. Trump has not faced any charges in connection with the January 6th insurrection. You all know about that. Merrick Garland facing pressure. We could talk about that. That's a piece about that, too. While President Joe Biden has not publicly said he believes Trump should be charged, the New York Times on Saturday reported that Biden had confided to his inner circle that he believed Trump was a threat to democracy and should be prosecuted. According to two people familiar with his comments, I hope that's the case. But White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said Sunday that he had not personally heard the president advocate the prosecution of any person, and that the Biden White House had returned to the practice of allowing the Justice Department to work independently. Post-Trump, anyway. The president has confidence in the attorney general, blah, 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 and I'm going to end there. Actually, that's the end of the article anyway, so we'll stop there. Let me go back to, I said there was earlier reporting that was, I thought, lousy, and many of the same reporters on this, but not the exact same lineup. Zachary Cohen, Caitlin Polance, Jamie Gangle, Ryan Nobles, Annie Grayer, and, a non-linked, Ashley Semler. On the earlier piece from last Friday. Official review of Trump phone logs from January 6th finds record is incomplete. In the 7 hours during which the White House records show no phone calls to or from then-President Donald Trump on January 6th, among the calls that are conspicuously absent is the one Trump made to then-Vice President Mike Pence that morning from the Oval Office. While the call is not specifically noted in the presidential diary or the presidential call log, its existence has been corroborated by multiple sources who were with Trump and Pence that day, including former aides who testified before the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack. And it's not the only call Trump's known to have made in that time frame that's not in the records. The mystery of the gap has fueled furious speculation as to why calls are missing. That includes allegations that Trump was using burner phones, which he has denied, but which others have confirmed, or that the logs were purposely suppressed. But the gap might have a less mysterious explanation. According to multiple sources familiar with Trump's phone behavior and the White House switchboard records, the January 6th log reflects Trump's typical phone habits. He mainly placed calls through the switchboard when he was in the residence, but rarely used it when he was in the Oval Office. The fact the log does not show calls on January 6th from the Oval Office is not unusual, said the sources, because Trump typically had staff either place calls directly for him on landlines or cell phones. Those calls would not be noted on the switchboard log. I don't actually believe that that's entirely true. The 6 pages of the White House switchboard logs for January 6th are complete based on an official review of the White House records. According to a source familiar with the matter, there are no missing pages, and the 7-hour gap is likely explained by the use of White House landlines, White House cell phones, and personal cell phones that do not go through the switchboard. But they know. I mean, I don't think that they're not logged. I don't think that that's the case, especially with White House landlines. It doesn't matter that they don't go through the switchboard. They go through the switching station, and there's a log of them. And, maybe they don't include those in the diaries, I guess, but I don't think that that's actually the normal procedure. Anyway, that was, I think, their speculation that everybody ran with to say, oh, you mean you got the story wrong? Now, as it turns out, they got the story right. You just didn't understand what it meant to say that the logs are complete. It's not that they captured all the phone calls. You already knew that to be the case. All right. And I think that's probably all we really need to do on that one. Probably a little bit more than I should have just read that first one. I didn't realize that they had changed their reporting in this second story. But good for them. At least they happened to clear these things up. Let's go back to Florida for a second. And I'll read you this story from MSNBC the other day. An interesting development. We'll see whether it holds up in later proceedings in court. But I'll let you, I'll read you the analysis piece rather than the straight news reporting piece, which I missed. And it'll lay out the basic facts of it along the way in giving the analysis. So we'll skip the initial happening and go right to the why this federal judge has had enough of Florida's racist election laws. What's going on? Well, a judge has found that Florida's laws don't just have discriminatory effect, but discriminatory intent. Why is this a big deal? Jessica Levinson will tell us for MSNBC, a federal judge in Florida, and these are the links to the fact reporting here, has clapped back, as she puts it, against the state's new restrictive election law, and more generally, this is the big part, voter suppression laws that threaten to undermine our representative democracy. In an opinion that spans almost 300 pages, U.S. District Judge Mark Walker for the Northern District of Florida struck down portions of the state's election law as unconstitutional and, perhaps more importantly, took the rare step of placing the state under pre-clearance protection for certain changes it may want to make to its election laws. The upshot of invalidating so much of the Voting Rights Act at the Supreme Court level and activist, intervention by several of the last couple Republican Justice Departments has essentially ended the practice of pre-clearance, which was a creation of the original Voting Rights Act, where they basically said, the former Confederacy, but states that have had a documented history of voter discrimination and who tend to try to get away with race-based voter discrimination when they can, and voter suppression when they can, have to get all plans to change things that have impacts on the elections, from districts and drawing districts to voting operations, and where they will have, anything they do by state law anyway that controls these things, all have to be pre-cleared by the Justice Department. In other words, an assumption that these states that have historically had problems are continuing to have problems, and the Justice Department is supposed to look out for them. And, well, they're supposed to be looking out for the people they're discriminating against. And again, there's another one of the assumptions back in the 60s when they wrote these things. Well, they wouldn't just, you'll never find a situation where the Justice Department, the Department of Justice of the United States, is a very serious place. Even when Republicans are in control of it, like in the Nixon days or whatever, they would never simply say that the state's discriminatory rules actually do pass muster just to get them by and to give them the presumption that they're on the level that the law allows for, just for partisan purposes. They just didn't contemplate that. And then, of course, by the time, say, George W. Bush rolled around, they absolutely were doing that. It was an active program. But basically, right, they were just saying you can't draw facially discriminatory maps that suppress the voting rights, to suppress the voting power of minorities, racial minorities. And the protection against that is there'll be preclearance. The Department of Justice will look at it, and their nonpartisan experts in the voting rights section will review it and say whether it's still too discriminatory and they have to go back to the drawing board, or whether it's A-OK. And the seal of approval from the Justice Department expedites things. Once you've said yes to it at the Justice Department, if there are still people who object on the ground in those states and want to sue, they need to overcome a higher barrier in order to get their suit started in court. They need to show that the decision was arbitrary and capricious and without any basis in, fact or law, as opposed to saying, well, they certainly appear, they have the effect of being discriminatory. That's the initial review that can take place. But if the Department of Justice doesn't see that they're facially discriminatory and says that they're not, then the barrier to entry to the courts to get redress for that particular grievance is that much higher. And it was just always assumed that the Justice Department would approach that fairly and professionally, until we got to the George W. Bush administration, when they were interviewing people for the higher up political jobs and asking them, basically, are you loyal to the Republican agenda? Are you loyal to George W. Bush and the Republican Party? And if so, we'll appoint you to these jobs where you will have the opportunity to reverse the decision of the professional staff at the voting rights section and give a facially discriminatory plan a rubber stamp instead, thereby blocking access, for the most part, to the courts for citizen activists and activist groups out in the states where this stuff is happening. And that was the idea. They actually did that. That was the design of good old Hans van Spakovsky and a few others. Bruce Schlotsky, was that his name? I can't remember why I'm so Schlotsky's Deli. Am I thinking of that? What was the guy's name? That was I can't recall now. I'll have to look it up. But at any rate, all of this then eventually gets flushed down the toilet anyhow, as they get a double coverage for this when the Supreme Court decides that the Voting Rights Act is no longer necessary. We're now post-racial, and there doesn't have to be a preclearance program anymore. Apparently one judge, and I think he's all alone, and you might find that this is reversed pretty quickly, but it was a bold stance. One judge in Florida says, nope, not only do we still need preclearance, but Florida should still be on preclearance. I'm putting them back on. So that means if anytime in the next decade Florida wants to alter its election laws, it must first get permission from a federal court. This rarely used remedy is only possible where a judge finds that a state's history of discriminatory voting laws is so egregious that it cannot be trusted to enact its own voting laws, and must first check in with the court. I'm not certain that that's correct. I might have it wrong. And, presumably she did some research on this, but my recollection is it's actually the voting rights section of the DOJ that gives the pre-clearance. But I'm not certain that's the case. Walker's opinion is the first judicial opinion to strike down portions of a restrictive voting law since restrictive voting laws began sweeping the nation after the 2020 elections, and the subsequent lie that there was widespread voter fraud. The judge's opinion is a stinging rebuke to an onslaught of voter suppression laws and the judicial decisions that have condoned them. The opinion reads more like a treatise on the importance of voting rights, the discrimination and excessive partisanship of lawmakers who have trampled on them, and the acquiescence and abdication of responsibility of judges who have happily allowed them to get away with it. Almost a year ago, Florida enacted a law that meant to make it harder for black people to vote. Just okay. That, at least, is Walker's conclusion. As he put it in his ruling, when the Florida legislature passes law after law disproportionately burdening black voters, this court can no longer accept that the effect is incidental. Florida's election law, among other things, limited the use of ballot drop boxes, placed new restrictions on organizations engaged in voter registration, and placed limits on so-called line warming activities, such as providing food and water to people standing in line to vote. Let's be clear. Florida attempted to choke off additional routes to allow people to be eligible to vote and to exercise that right. Whenever our elected officials, our elected representatives, try to make it harder for us to vote them out of office, we must ask them if they think throwing up barriers to the vote is the only way they can keep power. While Republicans may claim these laws are about making voting more secure, we know this is, to use a legal phrase, complete hogwash. Therefore, Walker's opinion is important not just because of the remedy, placing Florida under preclearance, but also because he explicitly concluded that it engaged in intentional discrimination against black voters. To be sure, as Walker concluded, the Florida GOP's goal was to help its electoral chances and harm opportunities for Democrats to win in the Sunshine State. But the way the party went about that, as is so often the case, was to make it harder for certain likely Democrats to vote, namely voters who are black. For the past 20 years, the majority in the Florida legislature has attacked the voting rights of its black constituents, Walker concluded. He further found that in the past 20 years, Florida has repeatedly sought to make voting tougher for black voters because of their propensity to favor Democratic candidates. This finding of not just discriminatory effect, but also discriminatory intent matters. And luckily, such laws are still unconstitutional in this country, at least according to one federal judge. Because Walker's opinion correctly strikes down the GOP's attempted power grab and defends minority voter rights, it seems doomed to be overturned. Florida will appeal the decision to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, a decidedly conservative-leaning circuit, where Florida's argument that this law is necessary to protect elections, it is not, is likely to find a more favorable audience. And from there, the case could go to the Supreme Court, which is even more conservative than the court that gutted the Voting Rights Act almost a decade ago. As I wrote last year, not me, in the wake of the passage of Florida's law, we need a two-pronged approach to fighting suppressive voting laws like Florida's. First, there continues to be an urgent need for Congress to pass federal voting rights protections. This was true a year ago, and it's even more true now. We've lost our federal floor of protection, and the actions of states like Florida show how much we need it. Not every federal judge will strike back against voter suppression laws as Walker has done. More significantly, the decision appears to be likely to be overturned by conservative appellate courts that read the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act as hollow protections for voters which can't be used to prevent Florida's attempted voter suppression. Second, we should take the unusual step of stripping the Supreme Court, and perhaps all federal courts, of the ability to weigh in on that new federal law. This would make the law unreviewable by federal courts. I don't know whether that's going to fly, but jurisdiction stripping is and should be a rarely used remedy, but our democracy cannot survive if our nation's highest court continues to allow states to trample on the right that we use to protect other rights, which is, of course, the right to vote. Well, she's right in that jurisdiction can be stripped, Maybe it's necessary, or at least for a period of time. It's, an extreme remedy, but it is out there and available, and it's a real thing, and we should think about it as long as we're thinking about expanding the court as well. All right. Well, I'm glad we got that all read into the record before the break. There's about 15 other things that we didn't, of course, but it's well worth our time anyway to have squeezed this one in. Let's see. When we come back from the break, if all is working and Skype is pumping, and I forgot to test it now that I think about it, we should have Joan McCarter on hand for a weekly visit. Stay tuned. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan is here. Her Skype is working. You had the same panic I did. Oh my God, what if it's not working today? I don't know why that would have happened, but
I had a big system upgrade last week, and lots of stuff changed, and it's like, I didn't try Skype.
Yeah, I don't know, that can happen, right? Every once in a while they change something, or just if you have a system upgrade and things are in a different place or work a different way. I one day found that I think Greg called and was like, hey, it won't answer. I don't know why this button won't click. So now I have to test it every morning. And, kids going to school at the same time. Missed the test today. But it's working. It's fine. That's good news. So, how's it going?
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. All sorts of fun things going on. And, of course, the big news this week. Are we getting the confirmation vote coming this week?
We are getting the confirmation vote this week. I am, in fact, in the middle of writing that up now. I had to take a Marjorie Taylor Greene detour in the story.
Okay. Is it related to the story, or this is something
It's
separate?
related to the story, yes.
Oh, okay. Is this the one where she accused everybody of being pedophiles?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Pro-pedophile.
Oh, okay. Oh, just yeah. Not that they're professionally pedophiles, but rather that they support pedophilia. Of course they do, as everyone does. Just like down there in Tennessee, where they're repealing the minimum age for marriage for reasons unknown. But it's totally legit.
That's totally legit, but not at all pro-pedophile.
No, I'm sure. Does anybody know what the minimum age in Tennessee was? I didn't even know where to look for that.
Probably 16. That generally tends to be the conservative state.
Yeah. It's
even Idaho got rid of that. Even Idaho decided, you know what, we really should have a minimum age for marriage.
Uh-huh.
And that just happened in the last 3 years.
Oh, well, okay. It was largely
they're probably ruining that now.
Yeah.
The QAnon gang in Idaho, thinking,
well, yeah,
we're behind the curve. We shouldn't have done that.
Right, possibly. Or else they're walking around saying, hey, why buy the cow? Whoa, okay. Jeez. Holy mackerel, guys. Hide it, if you would. I mean,
yes.
I'm glad to arrest you for this, but it never seems to work out until it's too late. But I don't know. I don't know what they would need to do that for in any state, anywhere. You'd think that would be embarrassing. I just went to say, wonder what is the minimum age for marriage in Tennessee? And I began to get set to Google it, and I'm like, I don't even want to Google this. I don't want a record of this.
Yeah, that's not what you want in your history.
Right. So, I'm not in Tennessee. I'm not planning to go there, but who's going to, that will raise questions if somebody finds out. Why were you Googling that? I don't even want that on my record. But you are introducing legislation to repeal that. Like, I don't know. What if I want to get married to somebody who's 14? Well, the answer is you can't. That's it. Just accept it. I don't know. But this guy says, I have the power to change that. I'm here for two things: cutting taxes and marrying preteens. Okay, I guess. Or my friends are. I'm asking for a friend.
So anyway.
yeah, that wasn't what we meant to do. But Marjorie Taylor Greene made us do it because she's an idiot.
Because Senators Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Mitt Romney will indeed vote for Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court.
Because that's a good thing to do, and she's a good judge.
Which makes her more of a bipartisan pick than, well, any of the last three.
Yeah. I guess all. Yeah, all right. Well, that's good. Congratulations. I don't think anybody ever said anything about the rest of them being pro-pedophile, but I guess that's probably true. I don't know. We might as well say so. And I understand that now it's also official. Well, maybe it's not official policy yet, but when Lindsey Graham says it, it sounds like he's probably got some backing. They're just now officially saying if they win back Congress, there's just never going to be another Democratic SCOTUS choice.
That was the gist of what he said yesterday, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that you wrote up on that. I mean, that's an accurate-ish reading of what he's saying? Just why?
Well, we knew it already.
We guessed as much, certainly, yeah. I mean, they did it.
And they had been saying it. I mean, go all the way back to 2016.
True.
And John McCain, everybody's great bipartisan hero, saying, if Hillary Clinton gets to be president, she's probably not going to get any Supreme Court confirmations. Okay. And joke, McCain, whatever.
Was it? Did he try to pretend it was a joke? All right, well.
And they did it with Merrick Garland.
Once we saw it happen, then, you can't have any doubts that they'll do that again.
And you know that if they retake the Senate this year and Clarence Thomas kicks the bucket,
right?
I couldn't think of a better term to use. I was going to try to soften it, but hell.
All right, well, that's
Clarence Thomas. He can kick the bucket.
Yeah. He's home. He can kick any bucket he likes.
Biden won't get a nominee.
If they're in control,
if Republicans take the Senate again.
Man. Okay. Well, I mean, it should be anticipated. I'm kind of glad that they said it. At least that some people can go to the polls with that knowledge. Some people will go to the polls knowing, great, fantastic. That's exactly what I want to do. Others will say, hey, that's horrible. But I don't know. Merrick Garland, I don't know. It doesn't seem to mind. He's not holding it against anybody in his decisions about how quickly to move with various investigations, but that's supposed to be a good and professional thing.
Yes.
But
I just don't want it to get lost in all of this that it was Mitch McConnell rubber stamping the QAnon thread that went through the hearing week before last, resulting in, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene calling them pro-pedophile.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell said, go after her on being soft on crime. Holly Cruz, what's her face with the hair?
Blackburn?
Yes.
Okay. It's a good way of referring to her.
Seized it and went full on pedophile.
They did. I imagine, I don't know. I'm trying to think about whether he would have said, well, not that crime, soft on other crimes, but I guess he just says, well, it seems to have worked. I wouldn't have chosen that one necessarily, but okay. And maybe she just wasn't soft on any other crimes, and she wasn't soft on this one either, but they figured as long as we don't have her on anything, we might as well be the worst crime we can think of, if we're going to lie. So I guess that's what they did.
The one that will rile up the Trump base. Because, of course, we know Holly, Cruz, even what's-her-face with the hair are all thinking about running for president.
Yeah, crazy enough. Well, what's-her-face with the hair is from the state where they want to lower the marriage age. That's interesting. We should ask her about that, I guess.
We should ask her about that.
So, okay. Well, yeah, they're all, I guess, targeting that, and they figured they could rile up the base because, of course, it's their favorite crime, but, you know, it's also the one they like to yell about the most because other pedophiles, I guess, lower their prospects. Like, you're taking people out of the dating pool, so I need to have you arrested so that I can get more kids. Last night somebody was tweeting about this, you know, just again saying, I just can't believe that they're going all in on the whole, you know, you're all pedophiles thing. This is the party of Denny Hastert and Mark Foley and all of this is going in. And
Jim Jordan.
Yeah. And the guy who was tweeting, I'll have to dig it up too, is from last night, saying, I know this is all going to be like hand waved away as ancient history, but I mean, seriously. And then he comes back, somebody reminds him, he says, I can't believe I forgot Roy Moore.
Yeah,
and
who they all endorsed.
Not only do they all, they all endorsed him. I mean, he didn't make it to the Senate, and that's a great thing, of course. But what he reminded me of, not only did he had forgotten Roy Moore, but exactly how bad it was for Roy Moore. Like, I guess we've forgotten all the details are in there, but you're talking about not only the party of Mark Foley, and does everybody remember Mark Foley? Because not everybody does, but not Mark Foley, look him up.
A while back.
And Denny Hastert, who, you know, the bulk of his crime, we hope, I guess, was before he was at least Speaker of the House. I don't know what he was doing with all of his time, but it doesn't really matter. Shouldn't be a statute of limitations on what he was doing. And there wasn't. But you're talking about they endorsed a guy who was so bad and so notorious, he was banned from the local mall because he was such a troll for the teenage girls. He was not allowed in the Gadsden Mall.
As an adult male.
Yes. Oh, and then he went on to become Supreme Court Justice for Alabama, but hey, and then run for Senate. A guy who was banned from the mall because he was such a threat to the local children was their Senate candidate. They endorsed him, and they still love him. And if he came back, he'd be endorsed again. And that's it's the other guys who have the problem. It's not Mark Foley texting with underage pages asking them, all sorts of questions. They're too disgusting to repeat. But that guy's texts were outrageous.
Yeah.
And he's just walking around. By the way, he was, he got VIP seating at Trump rallies in 2016.
Yes, he did.
Gee whiz. Who can tell?
This whole, the pedophile strain within the Republican Party has been disturbing me for a long time. But even yesterday, we find out that the father of the young woman who stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop, arrested for having child porn.
Man,
I mean,
and maybe she wanted to put that on the laptop. Who knows? But yeah, I know they don't have a whole lot. Anyway, that was incredible. They really, I was saying, they really family values the crap out of that, didn't they? What a family! Phew. But that's your Republican squad, everybody, and we just keep finding them and just keep arresting them, and I don't know what to do. There's nothing to say. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them, you know. And they so much so that they won't even disavow the people who get caught. So, I don't know what to say. But
I don't know what to say either. It's just astounding. It's disgusting and
they'll win the
horrifying.
nomination.
And this woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, is objectively the most qualified Supreme Court nominee we've had in decades. Decades. She's got more bench experience than four of them since Roberts, combined.
Well,
she's had more experience on the bench. She'll be only the second justice in history to have served on all three district circuit
really?
and Supreme Court when she's there.
That's pretty incredible, and it should be the norm, but it is
It
not.
should be the norm. They should all have this kind of experience. She's obviously got the temperament for it.
Yes.
Having sat through that for 20 plus hours.
Yeah, and however many years old she is, basically, having to deal with all sorts of strange ideas that other people have about who you are because of how you look.
Yep.
And
of course, not all of it on national television.
Right. But yeah, she's masterful, poker face to horrific. Well, I guess not poker. You're not supposed to just smile and look pleasant necessarily. You can look menacing in poker and get away with it. But she's terrific.
Just contrast that with Brett Kavanaugh
demeanor.
and the screaming and the tantrums and the insults.
Yes, right. Well, all the judicial demeanor that you say you insist people need to display, she displayed, and others very pointedly did not, but they're on the Supreme Court anyway. So at the end of the week, it looks like it's a win now with 3 Republicans on board.
Yes.
That's good news.
We probably won't even have to get Kamala Harris involved, although, she might want to.
Yeah.
Just because...
I'd be around for drinks, just to watch and
kind of
hang
an
out in the
historic
cloakroom.
moment.
Yeah. So she may be on hand for that reason, in hanging out on the floor or in the cloakroom.
She won't need to be presiding.
Yeah. So that's good news. And I
It
guess
is good news. It could happen by Thursday. It's going to depend on, as they say, jet fumes, how much Republicans want to actually leave for their 2 weeks of Easter recess.
Yes.
Do they drag it out as long as they possibly can, which will put the vote in on Friday, or do they just bow to the inevitable and let it happen Thursday and be gone?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see what their if you look and see what their plane reservations are. I guess you would know. Although they're flexible enough that they can change them for Friday too.
Yes.
All right.
Although I did see something late last week. Gary Peters is speaking at something on Friday out of D.C. that he would have to travel to. And Gary Peters is, of course, Democratic senator, and he is, I think he's the chair of the DSCC this cycle.
Very good.
And if he thinks he can leave on Friday, that gives you a little bit of a hint. But, of course, that could be changed.
I guess so. Or else maybe maybe he heard from Lisa Murkowski and then said, okay, now I can go.
Possibly, yeah.
That's a possibility. But, and depending on, I don't know who he's speaking to, but it's always, usually an exciting thing at the end to say, our speaker is going to be a little late. He's flying in from D.C. after having confirmed Supreme Court Justice Jackson. That would be, extra for the attendees. But, all right, so we'll look at the end of the week. We'll have that, and that's a prize worth having, even if Marjorie Taylor Greene won't shut up. She's never going to anyway. So enjoy it. We can lord it over her, perhaps, or maybe deciding vote upholding her sentence.
Justice Jackson will be there for a long time. She's 51 years old, so.
Okay. Everybody send her vitamins. Make sure she's healthy. Get her hooked up with the trainer, right? Yeah. We'll make sure that
RBG's trainer.
Yes, he's a famous guy now, and he should be trainer to the judiciary stars. So all of them should work out with him, and all right. Except
of course,
get their
one justice replacing one good justice is not really going to save things. So expanding the court is still kind of an issue, still kind of a necessity.
Yes, well. Anybody doing more talking about it, or like a good?
Well, lots of Republicans in committee were talking about it. This is going to destroy the judiciary.
Yeah.
The show they put on was really daytime Emmy worthy last week. The grievances and then they're continuing with the grievances about Robert Bork.
Yeah,
they
right.
brought up Robert Bork, who they keep conveniently forgetting actually
Yeah.
got a vote on the floor.
Yeah, just lost.
He
That's the way it
lost.
is.
Republicans voted against him. He lost
Yeah,
because Republicans voted against him.
yeah, that's a continuing part of their myth making, and I really don't. I don't know. It's just, I guess, no one. They haven't been called out on it enough by people who matter to them. I guess because
Right.
they know that the answer
Just
is.
us
It is kind of amazing that
bloggers.
they keep
But,
doing it.
Graham sitting up there talking about how Kavanaugh's life was ruined. Kavanaugh's life wasn't ruined. He's got the cushiest lifetime job there is in public service.
He had one even before the
Yeah.
nomination. So,
If anybody's life was ruined in that, it was Christine Blasey Ford's.
yeah, I suppose so. He's a Supreme Court justice. He's still got the lifetime appointment. Plus, he's got no debt somehow.
Yeah.
So that's great.
I think we determined that was mommy and daddy
I'm sure.
that took care of the debt.
They were wealthy people.
Yeah.
And, that's all right. I mean,
And then it's
leaves a lot to be
Janice Rogers
desired,
Brown.
are they upset about
And
that?
how Democrats kept her from being on the Supreme Court. She was never nominated for the Supreme Court.
Yeah, right.
George
That's one of
W.
the
Bush
problems.
could have nominated her to the Supreme Court.
Donald Trump could.
Donald Trump could have nominated her to the Supreme Court. They had 5 opportunities to nominate Janice Rogers Brown to the Supreme Court and did not. That was not Democrats' fault. But
No.
the extent to which they will rely on mythology
Yeah.
to keep up their grievances is really astounding.
It's pretty disturbing, especially since it is supposed to be posing for running for president, and it's like, I would have thought back in the olden days you wanted to demonstrate a firm grasp of true history, and now, of course, that's a disadvantage in seeking the Republican nomination. So you gotta perform and pretend that things happened that make people angry so that they get angry, and then a whole new generation of people believe that the angry making thing was true.
Yeah.
Then it's hard to undo after that.
It gets very hard to undo.
Hey,
We're not getting a whole lot of help from the traditional media on that one, I have to say.
well, they just report from it. It's so crazy it may actually work. It doesn't work either.
Well, it's
just
worked.
going-
I mean,
she's going to be
they
now
don't get called on their
confirmed.
lies, so their lies
I
get more
guess
and more
that's
and more outrageous because they can get away with them.
I mean, they do get away with them, and it works in that sense. It doesn't work in the sense that she's going to make it to the Supreme Court, but somehow that doesn't even matter. So, it's interesting for like horse race reporters. It's so crazy it just might work, but it didn't work. She's confirmed. Yeah, but it worked in the sense that nobody assassinated the people who said it. I don't know, something. Voted again. If they win again in 6 years, see, it worked. People forgot the thing 5 years ago when they were in the Judiciary Committee or something else. I don't know. It's odd that those who approach reporting on that basis, it just might work, are reporting that it was a savvy political play, though it didn't work.
And then it comes back to, the Republicans are doing their savvy political play, so leadership in Congress, Democratic leadership in Congress thinks, well, the Republicans have been so savvy, maybe we have to give them this on certain other things, like
what?
COVID funding, for example,
Oh.
which is going to possibly come up in the Senate this week, and will probably not contain USAID funding. It probably won't have the global stuff because Republicans don't want it. Which comes back to Speaker Nancy Pelosi punishing the Democrats in the House who got it out of the bill 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I forgot when it happened.
Yeah, okay.
When they were passing their emergency supplemental for COVID funding.
Right, the clawback of unspent funds.
Right. The clawback of unspent state and local government funds. They were unspent, but that didn't mean they were not being relied upon. They were budgeted for.
Okay.
in all of those states and localities. The governors totally freaked out when they found out this was in the bill.
Yeah.
And those House Democrats who also freaked out on their behalf were representing their constituents.
Yeah. I mean,
And now
that's understandable.
reporting is that Pelosi is going to punish them for embarrassing her, essentially. Which, yeah, that was bad, but she also sprung it on them.
Yeah. Well, that's a
And it
rare
comes
misstep.
from Nancy Pelosi agreeing with Republicans saying there can't be new money spent on fighting a global pandemic. It has to be already appropriated funding.
That's not fighting. That's just
That's not
standing
fighting.
around, I guess. Oh, well,
She explicitly said
that's too bad.
this has to be paid for. We have to have pay-fors in it. So
I
anyway,
love doing that, and we get no. We
I
never
mean,
won
you
that
could
prize.
claw back all of that PPP loan money that went to entities that weren't really qualified for it and were already rolling in dough. Lots and lots of corporate entities that did absolutely fine in the pandemic without PP loans. You could claw that money back.
You could. That was supposedly kind of sort of part of the plan. Like, Democrats were certainly clear in saying, yes, I know that there could be problems, but we really need to get money out the door. This is an emergency. But there was always, we have mechanisms for clawing it back when you find out that it's been misused. Let's use those tools. And then I guess we just didn't, because I guess we're still under the Trump administration. So I guess they wanted to be able to steal it and get away with it. And but I guess we could do it now. I don't know whether there's a statute of limitations on that stuff. There probably is. It's probably only a couple of years too, but too bad.
And the latest wrinkle now is that Republicans are probably going, not only are they taking out any of the global funding for fighting COVID-19 when we are seeing global resurgence of disease, they want an amendment for the $10 billion that they say they will pass. They want an amendment to keep Title 42.
Oh, yes.
The immigration policy that prevents people from being able to come into the asylum seekers trying to come in, being deported under the public health rule. That's Title 42.
Yes, this is where Republicans believe in the pandemic again.
Yes. Biden finally tried to rescind it, and now Republicans want to enforce it again. So, yes, that's where they believe in COVID-19.
Right. COVID is over. Okay, so then Title 42 should be over. Nope, COVID's back.
Yep.
For Mexicans. Okay, you can't do things that way. It doesn't. All right, but of course they would find objection to that. Now COVID's not over, and man, I had forgotten about that. And they found it again.
They found it again. So that's the Senate this week, probably.
Okay. And I do see down here another shot at Manchin here from the end of last week. What was this about? Setting up Democrats for an October inflation surprise?
Yes, this one's going to be bad. Because the extension of more generous subsidies under the Affordable Care Act for people's premiums is not going to be extended because he's fighting Build Back Better. People are going to get their new premium notices in October. And they're going to be substantially higher, sometimes doubled, than what they've been for the past 2 years.
And he wants this to... was it something that he specifically wants to happen, or it's just he's got another reason and this is the fallout?
It's the fallout. We don't know what his reasons are. In fact, he just said just now, what? There's no Build Back Better bill. I don't know what you're talking about. So, here's Manchin again playing his game of teasing that he's talking to the administration, teasing that he's talking to other Democrats, and then insisting, no, we're not talking about it at all. It's
weird. He's an oddball, that's for sure. I did see somebody the other day talking about how he, ruined the possibility of extending the child tax credits.
Yep.
And of course, child poverty.
And that he did explicitly.
Going back up. Yeah, I was thinking about that though over the weekend. I guess because this was other things that he was doing, but somebody brought that back up, and I was wondering, just because the child poverty rate has gone up again, and they were saying, it happened exclusively because he was lying about, there's going to be inflation, or people are using the money for drugs. Like from the 1980s, and they aren't, and they have the data on how it's used. It's hard to use this money because it's electronic. But
is not going to convince him.
Yeah, no, he was pretty sure they were using it for drugs, and I was just wondering. I thought about this. When are U.S. bishops going to deny him communion?
Good idea.
For lying children into poverty. I think that's a big deal. And,
good question.
I don't know.
Let's start asking.
I will ask some bishops. All the bishops I know, please come over. All right, I'm not well connected with them, but. Maybe in the future, but it's something to think about. You've given us a lot to think about, and luckily we'll also be able to end the week thinking about a new justice. Thanks for coming by and updating us on all of that.
You are most welcome.
And I'm not even sure what my schedule is next week. We might be off next week, so we have to see in 2 weeks.
We'll check and see. All right.
All right. Thanks.
NetworksRadio.com.
I guess I have to update everybody on what happened.
To Kagro in the morning with David Walton.
I'll be off because I've been given $1 million contract from the now. As it turns out, spring break is going to have to be college visitation week for the younger son as well, and I'm not certain what I'll be able to prepare, but we won't be on the air live on Tuesday morning, so we'll have to miss Joan. But the next time we speak, we'll have a new Supreme Court justice. Thanks, Joan.